guys, Lewis here, and welcome to XCOM 2 Overwatch, a mini-series I've come up with in preparation of my eventual Let's Play of XCOM 2, which will be dropping on February 5th, 2016. Now some of you may be wondering, what is XCOM 2 Overwatch? As I have said, it is a mini-series where I will be discussing everything we know so far about XCOM 2 and the events that led up to it, as well as the gameplay mechanics, enemies, and several other topics that I will be doing in future episodes. In some of these episodes, I will be bringing along several people to join in on the discussion and to give their own opinions and thoughts on the various topics we will discuss. That said, this series will be full of spoilers as I will be discussing everything that I can, including what we know from the book XCOM 2 Resurrection. So if you do not want to hear any of the spoilers, do not watch this series. However, if you don't mind spoilers, feel free to join in on the discussion and offer up your own thoughts on each episode's topics in the comments below. These episodes will be done in a slideshow format with a few exceptions of GIFs for a future episode. Keep in mind that I will be discussing all of this in regards of XCOM Long War mod on Impossible Iron Man mode. In this episode, I will be focusing on the story so far, some of the main characters, and the environments of XCOM 2. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now, for those of you who are new to the XCOM universe, you may be wondering, what is XCOM? Well, to put simply, XCOM is an organization that was put together by the world's governments to act as a first and last line of defense against the alien invaders. In this image, you can see the alien temple ship preparing for its invasion of Earth. However, it is not just one alien species we are fighting, but rather a whole conglomerate of assimilated and conquered alien species led by the alien leadership. I will briefly go over some of these aliens just to give you a better idea of what their impact means for Earth. The sectoids, while weak, are intelligent enough to harbor some form of psionic energy, such as melding their mind with one another to boost their combat effectiveness. However, their frail form does leave them vulnerable, which leads to them often being deployed in combination with the mechtoid, which you can see behind these two sectoids. This mechtoid can withstand a lot of damage and also receive a psi shield if a sectoid interacts with it. However, there is a more dangerous variant of the sectoid in the form of sectoid commanders, in which they are stronger than the common sectoid in every way, as well as have the dangerous ability to mind control XCOM soldiers. The Thin Men were used as infiltrators for the invaders. From a distance, they can pass as a strangely tall and thin human, but they are extremely agile and have the ability to spit poison and jump extremely high to gain an advantage over our troops. That's not the only thing that can gain ground on our troops quickly though, because the chrysalid is a swift four-legged insect-like alien with the capability of dealing heavy attacks with its claws, which can also poison its targets. The poison, however, is just one of the dangers it poses, as it can also implant embryos within humans that it kills, which will cause the dead human body to become a human zombie and eventually burst into a newly formed chrysalid. The mutons serve as the aliens' main frontline troops, being heavily armored and well armed. Mutons tend to fight within squads of their own and can sometimes be spotted with a berserker variant who charges into the enemy whenever it is attacked. In addition to mutons, they also have elite variants who are even more heavily armed and armored and tend to serve as guards and escorts for what aliens deem as high priority. The aliens don't just use organic-based life to accomplish their tasks, they also make the use of several robotic units similar to the mechtoid. One such unit is called the sectoid, which is a flying squid-like robot designed to stealth and wait for an opportunity to attack a soldier that is isolated from the rest of their squad. When possible, these seekers will try to suffocate a soldier and, if left unchecked, will kill soldiers one by one. Another robotic unit that the aliens tend to deploy with other mechanical units are the drones. Drones are another type of robotic unit that the aliens use in conjunction with other mechs. While they do not do too much damage in combat, they do, however, repair friendly robotic units, which drag on the fight. Some of these robotic units also include the Cyberdisc, a deadly unit capable of flying, dealing a lot of damage, and even form of a kamikaze should it get close to a soldier. However, all robotic units are not as powerful as the Sectopod. Extremely well armored and armed to the teeth, the Sectopod is armed with a plasma cannon and a mortar. The Sectopod is quite literally a death machine. And of course, there are the aliens that blur the line between organic and robotics, such as the Outsider. While not organic itself, it is almost a being of pure energy. On the other hand, you have other units such as the Floaters, who are failed muton experiments reused with the help of synthetic life support systems and propulsions. The same can be said about heavy floaters, who are even more armored and armed than the base floater. All of these aliens should show how far the alien leadership is willing to go to achieve their goal of genetic perfection and potential for power. Speaking of the leadership, this is what would look like. Known as an Ethereal, these aliens act as the leaders behind the invasion, using the various alien races they have uplifted and assimilated for experiments to try and create superior beings. Incredibly psionically powerful, these creatures do not use their physical form, therefore are frail, but their mind is very powerful. It can only be assumed that these Ethereals intend to do the same to humanity what it has already done to other alien species. Now keep in mind, XCOM 2 only exists in a universe where the XCOM project failed in their mission. There are actually 3 ways the XCOM can fail in the first game. The first way is that the Council nations pull their support from the project if they think the aliens are not being properly combated. In short, when all of the Council nations pull their support from XCOM, without funding and support, this allows the aliens to easily divide and conquer the world, forcing some governments to surrender or even join the aliens willingly, causing the XCOM project to shut down and disperse after being betrayed by the Council nations. The second way is that the aliens directly assaulting XCOM HQ, and if XCOM fails to defend the base, all of its soldiers and staff are either killed or captured and its facilities destroyed, leaving Earth defenseless against the alien invaders. The third and final way to fail is that the Volunteer, a soldier with great psionic potential, dies before completing their mission on the final mission, which leaves XCOM dead in the water as they do not have another way of dealing with the alien temple ship. The only way to win, of course, is that the Volunteer does complete the mission, which leads to them sacrificing their life in order to destroy the temple ship and stopping the alien invasion and destruction of Earth. Again, we are going off of the canon that the XCOM project failed early on in the war, which is pretty realistic if we take into account that XCOM 2 only happens if you fail, and seems to assume it was on something along the lines of going up against the odds of impossible Iron Man mode on the XCOM Long War mod, which drastically increases the difficulty of the enemies you face. As it was stated in the book, the odds were stacked against XCOM from the start of the invasion, with the overwhelming force of aliens and UFO attacks, which is in line with Long War, where things like late-game enemies show up early on while your soldiers are still using basic equipment such as Kevlar armor and ballistic weaponry. This also goes along with the idea of XCOM falling behind in research. XCOM, despite having access to all of the resources they could ever need, couldn't keep up on the research, which left them at a huge technological disadvantage with the aliens. As some people are aware, the majority of XCOM 1 was spent doing missions to repel aliens from cities and shooting down UFOs and raiding them. But according to the events of the book, XCOM was only able to shoot down 2 UFOs throughout the entire war before the aliens completed their takeover. This is where we move on to XCOM 2. Under the aliens' occupation, a new world government is formed known as the Advent Administration. As the aliens' puppet government, Advent represents the aliens' ideals of the next step in evolution for humanity, while operating under the guise of uplifting humanity. Aliens and humans can now coexist so long as humans accept their place in the alien hierarchy and allow the aliens to go about their business. Advent and the aliens construct new cities in which they encourage people to come and live, where they have been promised humanity will never be hungry, sick, or harmed so long as they live within their cities, despite the suspicions of thousands of people being kidnapped and never seen again. If you think about it though, the people who now live within the new cities are basically just cattle for the aliens, while Advent and aliens take care of everything for them and leave them ignorant with only what they know from Advent-controlled propaganda. As far as the citizens believe, they believe all of their problems and all of the kidnappings are caused by the resistance, people who are not content with the aliens ruling their world. However, that is what the citizens believe, and Advent likes to keep it that way. But as far as Advent goes, Advent and the aliens do not actively enforce herding people into the cities and do allow for humans to live outside the cities in small communities and old towns, so long as they stay out of the contagion zones. Now in this image you can actually see a small town community that there is a human presence here, but there's also an Advent presence keeping an eye on the human population in the form of a checkpoint and a scanner tower, most likely used to detect if there are any resistance members. The people living in the zones outside of the cities are known as natives, people who do not accept the aliens' rule or Advent's propaganda, and this is where most of the resistance operate. The resistance operate by raiding Advent facilities or hacking into propaganda, and these resistance tend to operate in cells but on a very small scale and are ultimately uncoordinated. But they do know that the aliens and Advent put in a lot of effort to contain and eliminate what is known as the contagion within the zones they do not actively control. This is one of the few things that they legitimately fear. This contagion is apparently some sort of crystal or glass-like substance that coats wildlife and the environment itself. However, its effect is not known, and other than the fact that it spreads rapidly, or if it will be at all included in XCOM 2. I would be very much interested to see if XCOM 2 will include the contagion at all, or if it was scrapped and not included. According to the book, a squad of resistance soldiers get involved in a much larger plan for a more centralized cell, which intends to revive the XCOM project. Through much hardship, they do eventually establish enough of a centralized zone to operate from, and begin the groundwork of XCOM once again with the help of several key members of the old XCOM project thought to have been killed or captured. This squad, with the help of a member of the XCOM cell itself, eventually comes into contact with a stealth submarine known as the Elpis, which translates to as the Hope. The Hope acts as a temporary mobile HQ of Dr. Shen, the chief engineer from the original XCOM project. His plan is to revive XCOM through the use of finding one of the two UFOs that was shot down and converting it into a flying mobile HQ and broadening the XCOM resistance goals and becoming more widespread. With him is his daughter and assistant Lily Shen, who follows in her father's footsteps and considered a prodigy. Eventually though, she would take over her father's position as chief engineer after Dr. Shen dies a few days later after a surprise attack aboard the UFO when the cell began its repairs and activating the ship's system and AI. The ship would be then known as the Avenger. In addition to the cell, it is stated that Dr. Valen, XCOM's chief scientist, also survived the war, has been continuing her research in her hidden base within her facility known as Wunderland, a active volcano island. She continues to supply the resistance with information on everything she has learned about the aliens' development, as well as hinting at a larger presence funding their cell with supplies and materials, which leads some people to assume that not all of the world's governments joined the aliens willingly, but rather infiltrated alien society and bided their time while sending support to the resistance however they could. Her facility, however, becomes compromised and is attacked by Advent forces and forces Dr. Valen to activate a failsafe, setting off the volcano, resulting in the destruction of her facility. She was not confirmed to be among the dead and is presumed to be missing and on the run from Advent. Without Dr. Valen for the time being, the cell searched for someone who would fill their role as chief scientist. Eventually, they would recruit Dr. Tigan, a ex-Advent scientist who turned away from Advent after revealing its real motives, therefore leading to his defection to XCOM. While the cell focused on consolidating their forces and resources after the death of Dr. Shen and the ongoing efforts of the restoration of the Avenger base, some resistance fighters managed to track down Central Officer Bradford, who had been on the run and hiding from Advent forces for over 20 years. He had given up hope, but when he had found out that victories were being made against the alien forces, he agreed to return to help provide a centralized command structure to the new XCOM resistance. With information provided by the various collaborators, XCOM was able to locate and raid an alien-held facility that was housing human captives for genetic testing. Within the facility, however, they also found the commander that had been captured from the original XCOM project, i.e. us. The commander was retrieved and returned back to base, but at the cost of the entire team that went out on that mission. These were the events that led up to XCOM 2 and the canon I've been able to piece together so far, and I cannot wait for the game itself when it's finally out. All of this really excites me, and I really cannot wait, and I really do hope that you have found this new mini-series informational and as interesting as I have, and I can't wait to do more topics on XCOM 2. So that's it for episode 1 of XCOM 2 Overwatch. Remember to rate, comment, and subscribe for more. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye guys.